All right, let's get cracking. I think we stopped halfway through the last section, and our stopping point was 6.3D, Alternative Routes to Self-Persuasion. We're also on page 255. Yay! Okay, so it's important to distinguish between the empirical facts uncovered by dissonance researchers and the theory that is used to explain them. The facts themselves are unclear. Under certain conditions, people who behave in attitude-discrepant ways go on to change their attitudes. Whether this reflects a human need to reduce dissonance, however, is a matter of some controversy. Over the years, 3 explanations have been proposed. Okay, so I think under certain conditions, whether this reflects human need is a matter of some controversy is the most important, those 2 sentences in the middle. All right, so they're going to talk about self-perception theory. Daryl Bem's 1965 self-perception theory, described in Chapter 3, posed the first serious challenge to dissonance theory, noting that we don't always have first-hand knowledge of our own attitudes. Bem proposed that we infer how we feel by observing ourselves and the circumstances of our own behavior. Yeah, that sounds critical. We infer how we feel based on our own behavior. Okay, this sort of self-persuasion is not fueled by the need to reduce tension or justify our actions. Instead, it is a cool, calm, and rational process in which people interpret ambiguous feelings by observing their own behavior. Dang, I don't know if I like that sentence or the one we just highlighted. I think I'm going to underline it. Rational process. I'll decide that later. Okay, but can Bem's theory replace dissonance theory as an explanation of self-persuasion? Bem confronted this question head-on. What if neutral observers, who are not motivated by the need to reduce dissonance, were to read a step-by-step description of a dissonance study and predict the results? Bem reasoned that observers can have the same behavioral information as the participants themselves, but not experience the same personal conflict. If observers generate the same results as real participants, he reasoned, it suggests that dissonance, I'm sorry, I dropped my highlighter, so I keep just waving it around. It's the problem with being resilient. You just use your hands way too much. Okay. Where was I? Bem reasoned that observers can have the same behavioral information as the participants themselves, but not experience the same personal conflict. If the observers generate the same results as real participants, he reasoned, it suggests that dissonance arousal is not necessary for the resulting changes in attitudes. To test his hypothesis in 1967, he described the Festinger and Carl Smith study to observers and had them guess the participants' attitudes. Some were told about the dollar condition, some were told about the $20 condition, and others read about the control group procedure. The results closely paralleled the original study. As observers saw it, participants who said the task was interesting for $20 didn't mean it. They just went along for the money. But those who made the claim for only $1 must have been sincere. Why else would they have gone along? As far as Bem was concerned, the participants themselves reasoned the same way. No conflict, no arousal, just inference by observation. I don't know if I want to highlight that just yet. So, should we conclude that self-perception, not dissonance, is what's necessary to bring attitude change? It's a tough question. It's not easy to come up with a critical experiment to distinguish between these 2 theories. Both predict the same results, but for different reasons. and both offer unique support for their own points of view. On the one hand, Bem's observer studies show that dissonance-like results can be obtained without arousal. On the other hand, the participants of dissonance studies do experience arousal, which seems necessary for attitude change to take place. Can we say that one theory is right and the other is wrong? Fazio and others in 1977 proposed that both theories are right, but in different situations. When people behave in ways that are strikingly at odds with their attitudes, they feel the unnerving effects of dissonance, and they change their attitudes to rationalize their actions. I feel like that's important. When people behave in ways that are not terribly discrepant from how they feel, however, they experience relatively little tension and form their attitudes as a matter of inference. Okay, that also is important. In short, highly discrepant behavior produces attitude change through dissonance, whereas slightly discrepant behavior produces change through self-perception. See, this is why I said at the very beginning, read through and then highlight, so you don't do what I just did. I just highlighted 2 sentences that were super long-winded, and they just concluded the entire paragraph with a succinct way of putting it. Son of a gun. Okay. I'm going to put a little note right here in the book. Only make a note of this right here. Sorry, guys. Ooh. Okay. I think I'm also going to highlight that. No conflict, no arousal, just inference by observation sentence from the last one. And it's not easy to come up with a critical experiment to distinguish between the 2 theories. Okay, so now that we've talked about self-perception theory, we're going to talk about impression management theory. Another alternative to a dissonance view of self-persuasion is impression management theory, which says that what matters is not a motive to be consistent, but rather a motive to appear consistent. Okay, that sounds critical. Okay, nobody wants to be called fickle or seen by others as a hypocrite. So we calibrate our attitudes and behaviors publicly in order to present ourselves to others in a particular light. Or perhaps we're motivated not by a desire merely to appear consistent, but by a desire to avoid being held responsible for bad consequences of our actions. Either way, this view places the emphasis on our concern for self-presentation. Yeah, I think that's critical. According to this view, participants in the Festinger and Carl Smith study mostly did not want the experimenter to think that they had sold out for a paltry sum of money. If the impression management approach is correct, then cognitive dissonance does not produce attitude change at all, only reported change. In other words, if research participants were to state their attitudes anonymously, or if they were to think that the experimenter could determine their true feelings through covert measures, then dissonance-like effects should vanish. Sometimes the effects do vanish, but other times they do not. In general, studies have shown that although self-persuasion can be motivated by impression management, it can also occur in situations that do not clearly arouse self-presentation concerns. Okay. I think that last sentence is the most. In general, studies have shown that although self-persuasion can be motivated by impression management, it also occurs in situations that do not clearly arouse self-presentation. So it's a theory, but it doesn't work for everything. All right, the self-esteem theories. A third competing explanation relates self-persuasion to the self. According to Elliot Aronson, acts that arouse dissonance do so because they threaten the self-concept, making the person feel guilty, dishonest, or hypocritical, and motivating a change in attitude or future behavior. Acts that arouse. All of that seems like their version of a definition. Okay, this being the case, perhaps Festinger and Carl Smith's participants needed to change their attitudes toward the boring task in order to repair damage to the self, not to resolve cognitive inconsistency. If cognitive dissonance is aroused only by behavior that lowers self-esteem, then people with already low expectations of themselves should not be affected. If a person conceives of himself as a schmuck, a schnook? Okay, I don't know what a schnook is. Sorry. He will expect to behave like a schnook. In fact, if Jeff Stone in 2003 found that when college students were coaxed. Okay, so they're all right. Sorry, I'm taking out a lot of the, what do you call them? The parentheses where the citations are, so that I'm not reading just a huge amount of citations and I skipped over something. Okay, so in fact, Jeff Stone in 2003 found that when college students were coaxed into writing an essay in favor of a tuition increase, a position that contradicted their attitude, and into thinking about their own standards of behavior, those who had high self-esteem changed their attitude to meet their behavior. A dissonance theory would predict, more than those who had low self-esteem. Claude Steele also, in 1988, took this notion 2 steps further. First, he suggested that a dissonance-producing situation, like engaging in attitude-discrepant behavior, exerting wasted effort, or making a tough decision, sets in motion a process of self-affirmation that serves to revalidate the integrity of the self concept. Second, this revalidation can be achieved in many ways, not just by resolving dissonance. Self-affirmation theory makes a unique prediction. If the active ingredient in dissonance situations is a threat to the self, then people who have an opportunity to affirm the self in other ways will not suffer from the effects of dissonance. Okay, I think that's pretty clear. Self-affirmation theory makes a unique prediction all the way to will not suffer the effects of dissonance. I'm also going to highlight that first sentence. If cognitive dissonance is aroused only by behavior that lowers self-esteem, then people with already low expectations of themselves should not be affected. From the last paragraph, I think that's important too. Okay, so give Festinger and Carl Smith's $1 participants a chance to donate money or solve a problem, and their self-concepts should bounce back without further need to justify their actions. Research supports this hypothesis. For example, Steele and others in 1993 gave people positive or negative feedback about a personality test they had taken. Next, they had them rate 10 music CDs and then offered them a choice of keeping either their 5th or their 6th ranked CD. Soon after making the decision, participants re-rated the CDs. As predicted by dissonance theory, most inflated their ratings of the chosen CD relative to the unchosen one. The key word, however, is most. The ratings of the participants who had received positive feedback did not change. Why not? According to Steele, it was because they had just enjoyed a self-affirming experience, and that was enough to overcome the need to reduce dissonance. I like that. This person agreed with me. I don't care what anybody else thinks. I'm not going to try harder to prove myself. I like that. I really, really like that. Okay, I'm going to highlight they had just enjoyed a self-affirming experience, and that was enough to overcome the need to reduce dissonance. Steele's research suggests that there are many possible ways for people to repair a dissonance-damaged self. But if these efforts are at indirect self-affirmation fail, would cognitive dissonance return and create pressure to make a change in attitude? Yes. In one study, college students were asked high choice or told low choice to deliver an attitude discrepant speech advocating that a popular campus tradition, running naked on the evening of the first snowfall, would be banned. Oh, advocating that it be banned, I should say. For those in the basic high choice condition, cognitive dissonance was aroused, pressuring them to change their attitude, favoring this ban. Students in other high choice groups, in another high choice group, who were later given an opportunity to self-affirm by expressing some cherished values, felt less discomfort and exhibited less attitude change. For them, self-affirmation provided the necessary relief. However, among students in a fourth group, also high in choice, who self-affirmed but then received negative feedback about the values they expressed, cognitive dissonance returned, creating pressure to change their attitude toward the ban. In essence, cognitive dissonance and its impact on attitudes reemerged from failed attempts at self-affirmation. Yep, we're going to highlight that. That sums that whole paragraph up. Okay. To summarize, cognitive dissonance theory states that people come to change their attitudes to justify these attitude discrepant behaviors or efforts and decisions. But self-perception theory argues that the change occurs because people infer how they feel by observing their own behavior. Impression management theory claims that the attitude change is spurred by concerns about self-presentation, and self-affirmation theory says that the change is motivated by threats to the self-concept. Okay, that whole thing right there, to summarize all the way to that self-concept, that's exactly everything we highlighted in the last 7 paragraphs. That's really frustrating. Why couldn't they start with that one? I guess because they want to give you examples so you really understand it. But that was really succinct, and now it's frustrating. Okay, to this day, new theories are being proposed. For example, the notion that feelings of dissonance are aroused not by inconsistency, but by the fact that the conflict impedes our ability to know whether to approach or avoid and how to act. Okay. I think I'm going to highlight the notion that feelings of dissonance are aroused all the way to how to act. Okay. So we're going to talk about ethical dissonance. In recent years, in domains as far and wide as business, I'm going to start that over again. Okay. In recent years, in domains as far and wide as business, law, sports, health, and education, many social psychologists have become interested in behavioral ethics, the study of how humans behave when facing temptations to cheat, steal, plagiarize, commit fraud, lie, or otherwise behave unethically. Yep, that's a term, and it's gonna be somewhere I can feel it. All right, standing in a supermarket express line with too many groceries to anonymous trolling to harass people online. Oh, got it. From standing in a supermarket express lane with too many groceries to anonymous trolling to harass people online. Wait. Okay, that's fine. To cheating on tax forms. Our day-to-day lives provide more examples than any of us would care to admit. Within this new field, researchers have addressed two types of problems. The first focuses on the unintentional lapses in ethics that can occur when otherwise good people do not pay attention and are not sufficiently vigilant, causing blind spots in ethical judgment. Two types of problems. First, unintentional lapses in ethics, causing blind spots in ethical judgment. Yeah, that whole thing. Okay. Research shows that such lapses are most likely to occur when people are fatigued. I know that. Which is why participants in laboratory experiments were more likely to lie and cheat when tested in the afternoon than in the morning. Yeah, but sometimes they're tired in the morning too. And when they're overly focused on the temptation of what is to be gained. I think I'm going to highlight such lapses are more likely to occur when people are fatigued and when they're overly focused on the temptation of what is to be gained. Okay, the second approach to the study of ethical behavior focuses intentional wrongdoing that people commit in order to serve their own interests. I'm also going to highlight that. And I completely failed at highlighting. Okay. From a strictly economic standpoint, individuals are thought to engage in unethical acts when the tangible benefits, monetary and other rewards, exceed the tangible costs, exposure, punishment. In the laboratory, research shows that when payment is based on self-reported performance and cheating cannot be detected, participants tend to inflate their claims in order to increase the amount of money they receive. In one study, participants inflated by 15% of the number of arithmetic problems they solved. In a second study, they lied about random rolls of dice on 40% of occasions. People are particularly prone to cheat for money after seeing a peer confederate they identify with cheat and get away with it. Interesting. Okay. I think individuals are thought to engage in unethical acts when tangible benefits exceed tangible costs. Yeah. Although people can be induced into unethical behavior by the perception of benefits relative to costs, A growing body of research has shown that human nature is complicated by the fact that most people feel badly about their unethical acts, even when they do not fear exposure. Behaving in ways that violate our own moral code thus threatens our self-esteem and arouses an inner state of turmoil that Rachel Barkan and her colleagues in 2012 have called ethical dissonance. Okay, so ethical dissonance is an inner state of turmoil caused by behaving in ways that violate our own moral code, threatening our self-esteem. Yeah. Okay, following in Festinger's footsteps, these researchers and others have suggested that when temptation lures us into the possibility of an unethical behavior, our moral self-concept is threatened both before and after we do it. To help attenuate this threat, we use various self-serving justifications to cope with both the anticipation and the experience of unethical dissonance. I think that's also important. I wonder if there's any research into how we justify it after. They've talked about anticipation and the during, before and during, but nothing about after. Anyway, social psychologists have begun to explore some of the pre-violation and post-violation types of justifications that enable unethical behavior by helping violators to do wrong but feel moral. Oh, there's a figure. Tempting situation, moral violation. Yeah. Reviewing this research, Scholl, Shalvey, and others in 2015 describe a number of ways in which people reduce their ethical dissonance, for example, citing social norms, to suggest that everyone is doing it, blaming others or circumstances, rationalizing the good that comes from the misdeed, confessing, apologizing, and offering compensation, and distancing themselves from the misdeed by asserting stricter ethical standards for the future and judging other transgressors more harshly. Okay, so a number of ways in which people reduce their ethical dissonance are all these examples. And I think they're all going to be important. I have that feeling. One particularly interesting form of self-justification that enables people to behave unethically is called moral licensing, a tendency to justify an anticipated misdeed by citing good things that we have done. That's going to be a term. Yeah. In an article titled Moral Self-Licensing, When Good Frees Us to Be Bad, Anna Merritt and her colleagues in 2010 reviewed research suggesting that past good deeds can liberate individuals to engage in unethical behaviors that they would otherwise avoid for fear of feeling or appearing immoral. Why do we care so much about what other people think? In one study, participants were randomly assigned to write stories that describe their own positive or negative traits. Afterward, they were asked if they would make a small donation to a charity of their choice. Those who wrote positively about themselves later donated $1.07, only a fifth of the $5.30 donated by those who wrote negatively. In a second study, participants were assigned to shop from an online store that carried a predominance of green or environment-friendly products, or conventional products equal in price. Moments later, those who shopped at the green store were more likely to lie to the experimenter to increase the money they earned. From dozens of studies, it is now clear that moral licensing operates like a moral balancing scale. When people feel as if they've established moral credentials, they anticipate less ethical dissonance about engaging in unethical behavior and become more likely to do so. That sums up it all. Okay, second to last section. All right, 6.3f, cultural influences on cognitive dissonance. I love when they go into the cultural part. Okay, so over the years, social psychologists have presumed that the cognitive dissonance effects uncovered in 60 years of research and described in this chapter are universal and characteristic of human nature. More and more, however, it appears that cultural context may influence both the arousal and the reduction of cognitive dissonance. Shocker. I'm going to highlight that. Sorry, if anyone else comes from a multicultural background, then you know culture is everything. Even here in the United States, if you are part of a religious culture and you come in contact with someone who has never been to church or synagogue or mosque or whatever else, and you use some of the terms that you use in church with that non-religious person, they'll just look at you like you're speaking an entirely different language. Context is so key. We use different language. We have different whatevers, but yeah. Sorry, that's a long-winded way of saying I totally understand why culture would play into this. Anyway, in Western cultures, individuals are expected to make decisions that are consistent with their personal attitudes and make those decisions free from outside influences. In East Asian cultures, however, individuals are also expected to make decisions that benefit their in-group members and to take the well-being of others into account in making those decisions. Western, free of outside influence. Asian cultures, also expected to make decisions to benefit the well-being of others in their decisions. Yeah. In light of these differences, Etsuko Hoshino Brown and colleagues in 2005 compared the reactions of Canadian and Japanese research participants in a post-decision dissonance experiment, in which they rank-ordered items on a menu by choosing their top 10 dishes. Then they ranked the list again. Half made the choices for themselves, and others were asked to imagine a close friend whose taste they knew and choose on behalf of that friend. Did participants show the classic post-decision justification effect, becoming more positive in their ratings of the chosen items relative to the non-chosen items? Yes and no. When they made decisions for themselves, only the Canadian participants exhibited a significant justification effect. When Japanese participants made decisions for a friend, however, they exhibited the stronger effect. Similar results have been found in other studies. To sum up, cognitive dissonance is both universal and dependent on culture. At times, everyone feels they try to reduce dissonance, but cultures influence the conditions under which these processes occur. Yeah, I think cognitive dissonance is both universal and dependent on culture is the best one of those two. All right, changing attitudes. Last section. Attitudes and attitude change are an important part of social life. In this chapter, we've seen that persuasion can be achieved in different ways. The most common approach is through communication from others. Faced with newspaper editorials, books, commercial advertisements, blogs, and other messages, we take one of two routes to persuasion. On the central route, attitude change is based on the merits of the source and communication. On the peripheral route, it's based on superficial cues. Either way, the change in attitude often precipitates a change in behavior. I think that's a good one to highlight. A second, less obvious means of persuasion originates within ourselves. When people behave in ways that run afoul of their true convictions, they often go on to change their attitudes. Once again, there are many routes to change, not just one. Cognitive dissonance, self-perception, impression management, and self-esteem concerns are among the possible avenues. From attitude to behavior and back again, the processes of persuasion are complex and interwoven. I think I'm going to highlight that one. From attitudes to behavior and back again. Because it shows it's one affecting one the other affecting the other. Yeah, I like that. Okay, I'm going to take a break and get my morning started. And I will see you guys a little later tonight to go over the review. I think I'm going to go over key terms and my notes and see if there's anything critical that I think is important to mention. Yeah, okay. Hopefully I'll see you guys there.